Okay, so we are responding to comments, and I have limited time, so I'll try and not rant on forever. So I think Nina, asks, could be saying that wrong, asks, or says, I think the big moment, inverted commas, that we strive towards is the recognition that there is no self. And that happens in a moment, doesn't it? ? Best regards. So this recognition that I talk about is never something that happens in time, and it's never something that happens to someone. It's something that is the case inherently in, let's say, reality or experience prior to the idea or story about time and a person existing in time relating to something separate from it. So I'm limited to everything I say pretty much is filtered through mind, is filtered through the medium of language, and that is bound to be but a description of experience from seemingly a position that's bound to use language that refers to self and time. What I'm trying to point to, or what's being pointed to, is something that transcends all of that completely, something that's prior to all of that completely. So this recognition doesn't happen, it's not a moment. The recognition that I'm pointing to, what makes it seem like that is what comes after the fact in the form of thoughts from a position that refer to an event. So that comes after, that's added to, and it recontextualizes the awakening or the recognition into something that happened to someone in time. But the actual recognition itself never happens to someone, never happens in time. It's quite paradoxical. When we get to the what's known as anatta or no self realization, it becomes then impossible to even talk about at all, because there's no self in that that's able to take a position on it and relate to it or describe it or label it as self or no self. Do you see? There's no self there present to talk about it or refer to it in any sort of way. So that recognition doesn't happen to anyone. It's actually very disappointing to the self. Very disappointing. It's like anticlimactic. It's not something that you can want as a person. You can want your ideas about it, a projection of what it's going to mean for you as a self that relates and refers to something. But the actual cessation of self is not something that the self can want. In fact, it's actually quite scared of it. What makes it seem like, this is why I don't often talk about the benefits of this awakening thing as it pertains to the relative timeline of the individual. Because you can get attached to an idea about what this is going to mean for me and how good it's going to be. So I'll generally describe it as peace. I'll generally describe this with the qualities inherent in it, like the absence of suffering, the inherent quality of love or peace. But generally I'm not going to say what it will mean for you and what you get from it, because you don't get anything from it. It's quite disappointing. I mean, initially you become much more sensitive to, much more aware of just how much suffering is here, because you can't take a position separate from it to avoid feeling it. As a separate thing in time, you're immersed in it, you are it. If that makes sense. So any of the stories about what this means for me and how it's going to happen aren't accurate at all. So this channel started out as me, a person, describing my experience is going through this awakening as a person. That's why I always refer to my earlier videos as delusional. I mean, if there's delusion now, I won't be aware of it, so it still could be delusional, so hold everything I say lightly. But I was describing going through this as a person, as an experience. And it's not an experience that happens to a person. That's just added to. That's just a description that comes after, added on top of the recognition that's already inherently there. But in saying that, I'm always trying to point past that, and that you just don't have to worry about it in the future or what it is. You just don't have to worry about any of that. Not at all. I'm trying to point past that to the simple recognition of what is inherently this anyway, what is inherently here anyway, and the qualities of that. Being completely okay, completely peaceful, and completely transcendent of any position or judgment about it or what it means for me. So I hope that makes a bit of sense. So Ted, I think, says, can you please explain identification in some future video? If there's only the watcher and the mind that identifies with the mind, or what identifies with the mind? Does the mind identify with the mind? I don't know. I don't know. The identification isn't something, this is my sense of it, isn't something that identifies with something. It's not two separate things. So it's not a mind identifying with thought. It's not a thing identifying with something else. There are no things. There's just an appearance that appears now that suggests in it this function of identification. Or there's so it's not actually happening. There's no actual thing called an identified entity that's identifying with this and that, and then throughout this awakening thing we then get rid of it. It was never there in the first place. The only thing that is here is what's already here, is this, and that's it. So this is it. Including the thought that appears now. What the thought talks about it will suggest there's a me that's identified with this, and then it identifies with its own non-existence as well. So it identifies with not existing, and that it reinforces that identity. So the if this feels like a watcher to you without thought, so if you get under thought or between thought through this inquiry process, and it feels to you, it's not labelled by a thought, you don't think it, but it feels to you like a watcher, then move into that. Maybe that's your intuitive path, so to speak. Move into and embody the position of the watcher, and then from there you can ask, is the watcher separate from anything else in experience if I don't use thought to describe it as such? Can the watcher be found separate from the appearance or that which it's watching? Is there anything that's actually separate whatsoever in experience if there's no thought suggesting that? Pardon me, I've got a cold. So the watcher state, I'll describe my experience with this. So there was a step back from the thought objects. There was a step back from the appearance. And that step back, especially regarding thoughts, created the space so that I could see that what I am is not the thoughts. It's quote unquote what's watching the thoughts, what is aware of the thoughts. And then it became obvious. Like, don't look to confirm this in your experience as I say it, as a concept. Just look and see, is the watcher, is what feels like you, separate from anything else in experience, including the thoughts? So the position of the watcher for me seemed to give rise to the illusion that there was a thinker of the thoughts separate from the thoughts. But as that separation collapsed, then I could see that all there was thought appearing. All there is an appearance. The thought not being separate from the appearance. No part of this sensory experience being separate from any other part, because there's no division here that can be found unless I believe a thought about it. But if it feels to you intuitively like a watcher, and you move into that, to say, so to speak, take a step back from thought, and it feels like it diminishes the volume and the reality and the intensity of thought, then I would say go with your intuition. But don't label it and conclude it as I am now the watcher. Just keep looking for separation. Keep looking for what an experience is actually separate from what deeply feels like the sense of you. And it might not even feel like the sense of you. It might feel like nothing you can describe. But I can't tell you what the identification is. I can vaguely describe it as a kind of thought, belief, that suggests something like, I am, from this position, generating these thoughts. These thoughts belong to me and I'm in control of them. Something like that. But these are still things that you don't have to conclude, and you never will, because this isn't about conclusions. This is about ongoingness. This is about verbingness. The mind will never find this satisfying conclusion or object called the me in experience, or identification in experience, or it will never find the satisfying moment that it can stand back from and label as awakening or recognition. What I'm pointing to is prior to all that. All of this is added to the fact, comes after, as a separation, a dividing up of experience, a complexifying of a simple singularity, a simple non-dual oneness that is the case anyway, because you are what you're looking for. You're looking for it, from it, but there's no position, there's no solid abiding position there that you're looking from, that you'll find and then you can reside there, because there's no you there's no you that can reside there, because the you that we're talking about now is everywhere and nowhere. It's completely free from having to exist, not exist, reside somewhere or somewhere else. So any of these descriptions that I'm giving you, use them to feel into your own experience. Use them as if you can feel something here that goes beyond the words, the words and the conclusions, just they're not as certain as this feeling that you're feeling. There's an inherent uncertainty to them, but what you can feel that might seem elusive, but it's there, has far more reality to it, far more certainty to it, far more inherent, let's say, existence to it than anything that we can say about it. So if you can feel it, just follow that and embody that in your own experience. Anyway, I'll need to go now, and I'll talk to you next time.